Any minute now, an historic decision on health care.
This is Fox 26 Morning News at 9 a.m.
Stay tuned for in-depth coverage of today's ruling. We've assembled a panel of legal experts. Okay, we're going to talk to Houston attorneys Ronald Dupree and Cindy Diggs right now about what that means for us. And I have to tell you, moments ago, right before we heard this decision, you nailed it because you warned us it was going to be very confusing. It came in confusing. It came in as unconstitutional for part of it, but constitutional if you tax them on this. Help break this down and tell us, where are we on this?
Sure. We were talking about the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court did not uphold the health care plan under the Commerce Clause, the power of the federal government to regulate commerce. Instead, the federal government, the Supreme Court upheld the federal government's power to pass this program as a tax. The federal government obviously has the power to tax all of its citizens, and the way they set up this plan is that you either buy the health insurance, or if you don't, you pay an additional tax to cover the cost of the federal government providing you with care.
Is it too early to say at this time what that tax would be so that people are going, oh no, what am I going to owe?
I think it's a little bit early. I think that the tax doesn't have as many teeth as you know, as a income tax would, because there are a lot of provisions that say that you can't levy a lien against property because of it. So I think it's too early to say what the impact of the tax will be. But I think it's going to be up to the administration to figure that part of it out. But I think this is really important, because if they decided that the federal government cannot regulate under the Commerce Clause, there's an entire line of Commerce Clause cases that are going to need to be looked at again. If the government can't regulate healthcare, which is a very big deal under the Commerce Clause, I think there's going to be some motivation to look at a lot of other things that the federal government regulates.
But let's talk about and kind of go back to who voted on this, because there were some swing votes that everyone was thinking about. Ronald, are you surprised to find out who voted for this?
Very surprised. It turns out that Roberts was the swing vote, and Roberts was appointed by George W. Bush and appointed to be Chief Justice. So I think everyone in the conventional wisdom was that Kennedy would be the swing vote, but Kennedy sided with the minority. Really going to be interesting to read the dissents, because I think Scalia's dissent is going to be something that folks are going to really look at.
It will likely be scathing. Another interesting thing about Roberts being the swing vote, he's the Chief Justice. He also reportedly wrote the opinion, so that'll be interesting.
Let's talk a little bit about Medicaid, because we haven't gotten into that portion of it yet. And what we understood that they were saying is that they will not penalize states if they don't participate with the Medicaid changes. What does that mean to everyone in the state of Texas?
Well, it is a little hard to predict precisely what it will mean, bottom line, but we know that the state of Texas, as well as many other states, have not wanted to cooperate with and go along with the provisions of the Obamacare bill. And what the U.S. Supreme Court said is that Congress is not free to penalize states by withholding funds if the states choose not to cooperate.
It sounds like that states may not cooperate if they're not in the mode to do so, if they're not going to be penalized. Isn't that kind of how sort of a feeling of it is? Oh, I'm not going to be penalized. Why do it if they don't want to?
Well, I think that that's certainly a very real possibility.
It's a big loophole, isn't it?
It's a big loophole.
I think it'd be extremely unpopular if it was the case that states could lose their funding and then those states opted out of it. So I think it remains to be seen whether or not they lose their existing funding or if they lose new funding under the Medicaid expansion. I think that part of it needs to be looked at. Also, it's going to be very important to look at whether or not this means that if there are other federal programs that states don't opt into, whether or not they'll be free to opt out and still keep the funding, because this is a relatively new thing, allowing states to opt out but keep their funding.
And what are your final thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. I actually kind of have a good feeling about all of this. As a lawyer and also just as an American, I think that I'm kind of proud of our Supreme Court. They had a lot of difficult arguments to get through, tremendous political pressure, and the Supreme Court is supposed to be immune from political pressure, and I feel kind of you know, kind of proud.
One of the questions at bay was this tax issue, and so I guess that's obviously the one that they honed in on here, that they could get, that it was constitutional if they just changed, I guess, the wording almost to say?
Yes, that's right. In fact, we were talking about that even before the decision came down this morning.
Your final thoughts?
Well, I think my final thoughts are that elections have consequences, and this is an election year, so we'll see this issue come back up in November. It's going to put tremendous pressure on both sides to either keep the president in office or to put someone that they like in office who will appoint justices that they feel like will support their positions.
So you think we're going to see a lot more of this play out, and it's going to become even more political than it already has?
I think it will be only political from here out. Before it was the law versus the politics. Right now it's only going to be politics because, you know, we're in an election year.